Miss Sanders. It's not about your numbers. Banks like ours aren't made for people like you. The words hit like ice in the lobby. Naomi's heels click against the marble floor, sharp enough to puncture the silence. Leonard Price leans back in his chair, tie perfectly knotted, lips curling into a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He doesn't need to say more, the dismissal drips through the room like a slow poison. Around her, micro smirks ripple through the staff. Whispered comments skim across the polished tiles, just loud enough to be noticed. Phones lift discreetly, recording the spectacle. A junior banker glances down at her screen, fingers trembling. Naomi feels it all, the weight of their assumptions, the invisible line drawn between her and the approval she deserves. Her jaw tightens. Breath even. Heart racing, but controlled. She's been here before, in other rooms, in other cities, in other forms. But this is raw, immediate, unspoken contempt. She's being measured, weighed, and deemed insufficient, not for what she's done, but for who she is. Leonard's eyes gleam with smug authority, the kind that comes from believing the rules themselves are on his side. Yet Naomi's gaze scans the room. Every angle. Every reflection in the glass doors. The lobby's fluorescent glare bounces off brass nameplates, the polished counter, the black granite floor, mapping out invisible routes for leverage. She notices a printer hum slowing in rhythm, papers scattered in micro chaos. Every minor imperfection is data, every hesitation a crack in the armor. Time stretches. The crowd freezes in muted observation, some holding back chuckles, others uncertain. Naomi senses it, the unspoken, "You don't belong here." Yet even as the humiliation sinks in, something else grows, the seed of calculation, the quiet acknowledgement that power is fragile, and that knowledge, precision, and patience can dismantle it. Her fists clench, subtle but intentional, an internal signal, this will not define her. Not today. Not ever. Have you ever been dismissed before they even heard your story? Watch what happens next. Naomi slides past the reception desk, heels quiet now, but her mind is alive. Every tick of the clock, every shuffle of paper, every soft exhale in the room is data. Leonard's office waits at the end of the hallway, a glass door etched with the nameplate, Leonard Price, Senior Manager. Beyond it, authority distilled into polished wood, leather chairs, and the invisible barrier of entitlement. She moves through the lobby like a shadow with purpose. Staff eyes flicker, some polite, some wary, others openly amused. A teller coughs, barely noticeable, but the timing betrays a micro-tension. Naomi sees it all. The hesitant pauses, the tiny flinch when Leonard speaks, the way compliance officers hover just out of reach, ready to enforce rules but unsure whose side they're truly on. Every detail catalogued. Every gesture noted. A junior banker, Camille, adjusts her scarf, eyes darting at Naomi and then quickly down to a ledger. A senior loan officer, Grant, leans back, arms crossed, lips pressed tight, exuding the perfect mix of loyalty and skepticism. Naomi files these observations silently, imprinting the hierarchy, mapping the invisible web of influence. Leonard's office looms ahead. She doesn't rush. The lobby is a stage, and she is both performer and observer. Her phone remains in her pocket, camera off, recording nothing in digital form, but the mind records everything, sharper than any lens. She notes procedural gaps, the slight inconsistencies in policy enforcement, the way forms are rubber-stamped when no one is looking. "Please, Miss Sanders, have a seat," Leonard says, voice smooth, clipped, rehearsed. His posture radiates confidence, the kind built over decades of bias masquerading as prudence. Naomi obeys, sitting just inside the edge of his field of view, spine straight, hands resting calmly on her lap. She watches as he gestures for a document. He doesn't notice that she's already seen the misalignment in his workflow, certain approvals bypass oversight, certain files are shuffled carelessly, procedural no-go zones where policy is conveniently ignored. Every action, every micro-decision, is a map of opportunity. Naomi catalogues silently. The junior officer's hesitance, potential ally or at least a witness. The senior officer's rigid loyalty, predictable patterns can be exploited. Procedural gaps, small, seemingly inconsequential oversights that, if leveraged, could force concessions. Timing windows, the flow of meetings, approvals, and document routing. She sees the patterns of control, the mechanical confidence, and the underlying fragility. Leonard smiles, unaware that every syllable of his condescension feeds her strategy. Miss Sanders, we've reviewed your loan request. Our criteria. He begins, voice calm but firm. Naomi hears the implicit subtext, we don't make this work for you, because you are who you are. His eyes flick briefly toward the compliance officer, a subtle nod of unspoken certainty. And yet, Naomi notices the cracks. The cursor blinks too long on his screen, the spreadsheet misaligned, the stamp ready but unused. Timing is off, there is hesitation where there should be none. His authority, though polished, is built on assumption rather than fact. The lobby behind her hums with suppressed whispers, muffled giggles, the low vibration of a printer completing a task. Each sound punctuates her observations. She imagines this space as a chessboard, the pieces moving predictably, the pawns unaware of the strategy forming quietly in her mind. Leonard leans forward. I need to remind you, Miss Sanders, that banks like ours follow protocol meticulously. Exceptions aren't made lightly. His tone is meant to intimidate, to remind her of her place. But Naomi doesn't flinch. She tilts her head slightly, just enough to let him know she is present, engaged, and calculating. Internally, she begins a silent tally. Staff dynamics, Camille could be swayed with gentle observation, Grant is rigid but vulnerable to factual challenges. Procedural leverage, overlooked clauses, mismatched approvals, timing windows. Psychological leverage, pride, bias, underestimation. Leonard believes he is untouchable. He is not. Her eyes drift briefly to the reflective surfaces, the polished granite counter, the brass handles, the glass separating the public from Leonard's sanctum. Each reflection a reminder, she is visible, observed, but also in control of what is seen. She does not need to shout. She does not need to protest. She simply catalogs, learns, waits. She listens to every word. Every pause is data. Every hesitation a potential in. The banker's smooth professionalism is a veneer, beneath it, Naomi can see the fragility, the ego, the assumptions that if pushed just enough, will betray him. The lobby quiets as a client leaves, the echo of footsteps like punctuation. Naomi exhales subtly, a controlled release. The pulse quickens, her own heartbeat a metronome, her mind weaving patterns of leverage and timing. Audience, take note, she is under siege, exposed to bias, humiliation, and institutional weight. And yet, even in this moment of apparent vulnerability, she is plotting, calculating, turning every slight, every smirk, every procedural flaw into potential ammunition. The tension you feel now is only the beginning. Every pause, every breath, every glance across the polished surfaces, is a reminder that the system is watchful, but not infallible. And Naomi? She is ready. Pull back for a moment. Let the weight settle. This isn't just a loan application. It's a battlefield. And the first move has already been made. Columbus moved around Naomi Sanders like it always did, busy, loud, unaware. Streetcars rattled past North Market. Delivery trucks honked. Vendors shouted over each other. But she was elsewhere. Walking through the crowd, she didn't see the pedestrians, the smell of roasted coffee, the glint of morning sun on wet asphalt. She saw the dismissals, the smirks, the "we'll call you" that never came. Tessa Montgomery waited at the cafe, her notebook open, pen poised. She didn't smile. That wasn't her style. Naomi, she said, voice low, they're underestimating you. Don't let it stick. Turn it into leverage. Naomi nodded, sipping her coffee slowly, letting the warmth ground her. Every word Tessa said sank into the memory she'd carried to the bank lobby, to the meetings, to the negotiation table. Her brother, Travis, had always been quiet about his concern, but he had a way of making a glance carry more weight than 1,000 pep talks. Keep your cool. Watch. Learn. Wait. Naomi remembered that glance now. Heartbeat steady. Jaw tight. She had memorized what each look, each pause, each hesitation from others meant, and she would exploit it without mercy. Montage, spreadsheets stacked like bricks, slides littered with bullet points and charts, revenue projections corrected and recalculated until no flaw could survive. Every line of her pitch rehearsed. Every projection challenged by Marcus Hensley, her operations partner, who wasn't gentle. Are you sure these numbers hold under scrutiny? Marcus didn't ask to test her, he asked to sharpen her. Naomi's answers were calm, precise, rehearsed, but not rehearsed enough to feel inhuman. She could feel the tension pulse in her chest, feeding her focus. At Cohatch, she walked past co-working tables buzzing with energy, eyes scanning every detail, chairs slightly out of place, laptops left unattended, people overhearing conversations they shouldn't. Observation became instinct. Every micro-flinch, every pause, every smirk in a previous bank meeting was catalogued, filed, and turned into a potential advantage. Have you ever been dismissed before they even saw your skill? Evenings were long. The whiteboard was alive with numbers and arrows. Naomi repeated dialogues with imagined investors, rehearsing tone and timing, watching for every possible misstep. Tessa watched from the side, occasionally nodding, occasionally jotting a note. Marcus leaned in over spreadsheets. Your assumptions here. Are you counting on their mistake, or your merit? Naomi adjusted. Corrected. Sharpened. Calculated. And then the call came. Damon Whitaker. Not random. Not casual. His voice, crisp, deliberate, carried the weight of someone used to being heard, and someone used to spotting the competent instantly. I've been following Sanders' motion. Impressive work. Tell me more about the scalability projections. Naomi answered with precision, her words carrying weight because they were honed from rejection, from observation, from microaggressions endured in lobbies, offices, and coffee shops alike. Columbus streets blurred outside, the hum of morning, the smell of fresh bread, the grit of the city. Inside, Naomi was orchestrating a quiet revolution. Every slight absorbed, every dismissal catalogued, every system gap noted. She had built a blueprint that didn't just navigate bias, it used it as fuel. The call ended. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. There was a bigger game now. The opportunity had arrived, but so had the stakes. Ever had someone doubt your competence so completely that it became your strategy? Watch closely, this is where it begins. And just as the night pressed in, the ping came again, another message from Damon. Meeting request. Eyes narrowing, Naomi straightened. She was ready. Every lesson, every slight, every preparation, had led to this. The system that had dismissed her was about to be tested in ways it could not predict. Comment below if you've ever been told you don't belong, and imagine what you could do if you used it to your advantage. The revolving doors of Huntington Bank clanged behind Naomi Sanders, swallowing the warmth of the Columbus afternoon and replacing it with fluorescent glare and the hum of printers. She moved like she belonged, though the space was designed to whisper the opposite. Leonard Price sat behind his polished desk, immaculate tie, perfectly ironed suit, and a smile just wide enough to hide the faint curl of contempt in his lips. Miss Sanders, he said, voice smooth, deliberate, clipped to professionalism but weighted with something darker. It seems your proposal doesn't align with our lending criteria. Naomi's fingers rested lightly on the edge of her leather portfolio, poised but calm. She catalogued every micro-expression, every subtle tremor in his delivery. Grant Holloway, hovering at the corner of the office, avoided her eyes, his body language a silent testimony to the discomfort in the room. Around them, other clients lingered, pretending to check emails, pretending not to hear. Some of their phones pointed subtly toward her. The audience of the lobby was quiet but present, witnesses to her quiet humiliation. Do you see it? That split-second shift in the air, the audience, the whispers, the almost invisible cameras. The world watches you quietly before it decides if you belong. Naomi's pulse quickened, but her exterior remained still. Every denial was a carefully choreographed performance, designed to humiliate without saying a word. The racial undertone hung heavy, invisible yet thick, dressed up as corporate decorum, polite phrasing, the ritual of procedure. "It's policy," Leonard said, leaning back slightly, a mock of ease in his posture. "We have to protect the bank." Naomi's mind catalogued, predictable phrasing, overconfidence in authority, habitual micro-delays, subtle inflections signaling doubt in her capacity. Each gesture, each repetition, was a data point. Each delay a crack in the polished veneer. Her eyes swept the room, noting the soft tremor in Camille Horton's hands as she typed silently, the slight tilt of Grant Holloway's head as he feigned attention, the faint rise of whispers among the waiting clients. Ever been evaluated by a system that pretends to be neutral while quietly writing you off? Notice the details, they are the cracks you can leverage. Leonard's smile tightened. "You understand, Miss Sanders, that banks like ours, well, they're not exactly structured for everyone." A dagger disguised as civility. Naomi's jaw clenched imperceptibly, her gaze sliding across the room. She noticed the receptionist's faint smirk, the way a security badge caught the light, and how the pattern of behavior repeated across every desk and every procedure. Every slight humiliation, every delay, every question that implied incompetence, was predictable. And that predictability was opportunity. She catalogued them all silently, the extra step in the loan review, the repeated requests for documents already submitted, the subtle misstatements of policy meant to confuse. She memorized the sequence of doors, the flow of clients, the habitual glances that accompanied Leonard's corrections. Each small error or inefficiency was a point to exploit later. Watch carefully, systems rely on overconfidence. The bigger the fortress, the larger the cracks. Have you noticed yours? She returned again the following day, following the same ritual of entrances, glances, and data collection. Each visit layered new microaggressions over the old, the polite sigh when she corrected a figure, the over-articulate explanation of procedures she already knew, the subtle eye rolls, the casual "we'll need to revisit this later" as if she weren't present in the room. Naomi did not flinch. Her hands stayed steady on the portfolio. Her eyes traced the motion of pens, the flip of paper, the precise sequence of digital entries. Each delay, each perfunctory dismissal, each polite rebuke was a signal. The bank's confidence in its authority was inflated, unguarded. Camille moved more deliberately now, her small gestures carrying silent warnings. Naomi caught them, a discreet glance, a slightly ajar folder, the gentle tap on the keyboard signaling a confidential note to compliance. The internal system was brittle, cracks existed. Sometimes it's not a shout that warns you, it's the subtle whisper. Have you heard them? The ones everyone else ignores? Naomi's visits became a rhythm of observation. She mapped the bank like a chessboard, front desk to waiting area to Leonard's office to side hall for private discussions. Every choke point, every forced signature, every repeated form was a calculated obstacle, and a potential lever for later. The lobby became a theater of subtle tension. Clients lifted phones discreetly, staff avoided or watched her, Leonard repeated rehearsed lines of polite dismissal. Naomi recorded each pattern internally. Every sigh, every delay, every hesitant gesture was part of the sequence she was memorizing. By the fifth visit, Leonard's veneer of calm began to crack, though only imperceptibly. He gestured impatiently, skimmed her updated projections, misquoted dates and figures. Naomi caught them all. Every error, every procedural overreach was logged silently. She walked away toward the Ohio State House after that session, letting the weight of the institution settle around her. Each step on the marble pavement was measured, a symbolic reminder of the patterns she had decoded, the institutional challenge she was up against. The city moved around her. Traffic, pedestrians, street vendors, each sound layered over the memory of procedural delays, microaggressions, and subtle dismissals inside the bank. Naomi's strategy was taking shape: identify weakness, leverage allies, prepare for the decisive strike. The audience, Silent and faceless, felt the tension, the slow burn, the layering of injustice and preparation. Look at her, calm but observing. The world underestimates her every move, and yet she knows. How often do we ignore the quiet strategy around us? Comment if you've been dismissed before anyone gave you a chance. Every denial, every subtle racial undertone, every procedural slight was now a step in Naomi's architecture of response. The bank believed it controlled the narrative, but she had already catalogued every move, every misstep. Outside, the Ohio State House's steps glistened faintly in the sun, white stone against the chaos of the city, a mirror of the systemic structure she was quietly learning to navigate. Her pulse slowed, thoughts sharpened. Preparation was her weapon, observation was her shield. By the time she left the bank again, the tension inside the building, the micro-observations, the subtle alerts from Camille, all coalesced into the strategic advantage she had been quietly building. Each micro-denial was now a stepping stone, every procedural delay a predictable weakness. Naomi had not reacted outwardly, but internally, a precise plan was forming. This is the lesson: endurance, observation, patience. Systems can be read. Weakness can be turned into leverage. Did you see it coming? Watch carefully, the reversal is near. Naomi Sanders walked through the tall, industrial doors of the Idea Foundry in Franklinton, the faint hum of printers, the scrape of chair legs, and the low murmur of other entrepreneurs forming a rhythmic backdrop. The smell of sawdust and coffee lingered faintly, a scent that had begun to signify opportunity, even to her conditioned senses. She moved with precise steps, portfolio tucked under her arm, eyes scanning the open workspace with quiet calculation. Every desk, every whiteboard, every exposed brick wall was catalogued, where she might hold meetings, where she might catch the nuances in conversations, where the patterns of behavior could be observed and recorded. She had arrived early. Damon Whitaker, a local investor whose reputation stretched quietly but potently through Columbus entrepreneurial circles, was already seated in the corner, his posture deliberate, his eyes attentive but nonchalant. Naomi noted the subtle signals, the slight furrow of his brow when reviewing a pitch deck, the occasional tilt of his head when someone made a bold claim, the almost imperceptible nod when he discerned sincerity. Damon was an observer by nature, and Naomi appreciated that. Notice the quiet ones, they see everything. The real power rarely announces itself. Marcus Hensley, her operations head and trusted collaborator, moved beside her, carrying the weight of spreadsheets, performance projections, and logistics maps. He was quieter than Naomi in public, but equally precise, noting the same micro-expressions and procedural patterns she catalogued within the bank. Travis Garrison, Naomi's brother and moral compass, followed with the subtle energy of encouragement, a human reminder that this battle was never solely strategic, it was personal, systemic, and familial. "Morning, Damon," Naomi said, voice steady, professional, carrying no trace of her recent frustrations. Damon's eyes rose slowly, settling on her, scanning her with the detached, evaluative calm of someone accustomed to seeing people underestimated, overlooked, misclassified. "Naomi Sanders," he said, deliberately emphasizing the formality, "I've heard whispers." A slight smirk tugged at the corner of his lips, not condescending, not mocking, but a spark of recognition that she had earned. She laid out the materials methodically: projections, operational workflows, revenue forecasts, community engagement plans. Every document, every chart, every figure was precise, deliberate, a reflection not just of competence but of vision. Damon listened, silent except for the occasional nod, the soft murmur of approval when a number was particularly compelling. Ever been in a room where someone finally sees you? It's quiet, almost imperceptible, but it hits harder than applause. Marcus challenged assumptions where necessary, quietly raising questions that probed deeper than surface numbers. "What's your projected margin if Leonard reconsiders and changes terms?" he asked, a seemingly innocuous line, but layered with anticipation. Naomi smiled slightly, appreciating the subtlety. Every question, every prompt, every cross-examination was a way to sharpen the final strategy. Travis leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Remember, this isn't just about the money. It's about leverage. Make him wish he had been fair the first time. Naomi's mind catalogued Leonard's predictable patterns, procedural rigidity, and subtle bias had already been analyzed. Every ally's contribution now layered into a comprehensive model, investor recognition, operational excellence, and systemic leverage points. The strategy was no longer reactive, it was anticipatory. They moved then to a corner of the idea foundry lined with whiteboards. Naomi sketched quietly, connecting operational flows with potential investor introductions, community partnerships, and market expansion opportunities. Marcus suggested a reallocation of warehouse resources. Tessa proposed a logistics optimization that would reduce lead time by 3 days. Each micro-adjustment built a more formidable, seemingly unassailable structure around Sanders' motion. Damon watched silently, then leaned forward. His voice, low, almost conspiratorial, cut through the hum of activity around them. Naomi. They misclassified your risk. They don't see you. Naomi froze for a moment, letting the weight of the statement settle. She had catalogued dismissals, microaggressions, procedural oversights, every micro-behavior that suggested underestimation, but hearing it articulated by someone with resources, someone outside the struggle, sharpened the sense of potential. This is the pivot point, recognition from an unseen ally, leverage discovered in plain sight, invisible to those who dismissed you. Did you catch the subtle shift in air? Over the next hours, Naomi and Damon refined the approach. Investor introductions were planned, operational redundancies eliminated, and potential objections anticipated and addressed in advance. Each scenario was tested quietly, internally, and rigorously. The focus was clear, a systemically perfect, flawless execution that would leave the bank and any detractors scrambling. Tessa, her longtime mentor, contributed an additional layer. Focus not just on numbers, but optics. Every interaction, every handshake, every contract signing, it must signal authority without arrogance. Naomi nodded, internalizing the lesson. It was not enough to win, she needed to win visibly, indelibly, so the bank could not erase the moment with procedural politeness. As the sun dipped lower over Columbus, painting the brick and glass of the Gravity building with amber hues, Naomi walked through the space alone briefly, absorbing the rhythm of the city. The idea was clear: strategic patience, operational perfection, ally leverage. Every office, every investor, every community partner now mapped in her mind as part of a larger narrative. She was orchestrating a quiet reversal of fortune, a demonstration of systemic insight that Leonard Price could neither anticipate nor prevent. Damon leaned close, whispering, "This isn't charity, Naomi. This is recognition. They will see the result before they understand the process." Naomi's lips pressed into a thin, calm line. The weight of anticipation hung in the air, subtle but electric. Outside, Columbus moved on, indifferent. Inside, a strategy of reclamation and leverage was taking shape, slow burning but inexorably precise. Notice the rhythm, the slow burn, the layering, the invisible calculations. Watch how preparation becomes power, unseen until it is undeniable. Later, in a quiet corner of Third Wave Coffee Shop, she reviewed projected pitch decks for potential retail contracts. The espresso machine hissed and steamed around her, blending into the background of her calculated silence. Every page, every figure, every projection was cross-referenced against known investor patterns. Damon offered subtle cues, small acknowledgments, a nod at a particularly aggressive margin projection, a quiet hum at a well-timed revenue forecast. Naomi catalogued these micro-reactions just as carefully as she had catalogued microaggressions at the bank. Her mind moved constantly, linking each micro-reaction, each potential leverage point, each ally contribution into a single coherent strategy. The plan was not just to secure funding, it was to demonstrate undeniable merit in a way that the bank could neither ignore nor reclaim. Marcus, glancing at her notes, remarked quietly, "You're building more than a business. You're building a mirror that will reflect their misjudgment back at them." Naomi allowed herself a small smile, noting the precision in his wording. It was exactly the framing she needed. As the day drew to a close, Naomi's internal monologue carried the quiet rhythm of anticipation. Each step she had taken, every ally she had enlisted, every micro-observation at the bank, now converged into a strategy that was methodical, inevitable, and unassailable. Damon's voice remained a soft whisper in her memory. They misclassified your risk. They don't see you. She left the coffee shop, the amber glow of the setting sun framing her silhouette against the Columbus skyline. The city hummed around her, unaware of the quiet storm she was orchestrating. Every detail of the bank, every procedural oversight, every microaggression catalogued in her mind. The allies, the investors, the operational adjustments, each part of a precise, controlled mechanism that would leave Leonard Price and his institution exposed, scrambling to reconcile their own misjudgment. Watch her, calm, methodical, unstoppable. Notice the subtle orchestration, the layering, the invisible leverage. Do you see how preparation becomes power? How the quiet ones rewrite the rules? By the time she returned to the Idea Foundry for a final review of operational adjustments, Naomi had refined every step, rehearsed every potential investor interaction, and anticipated every countermove from the bank. The strategic alliance was complete, quiet yet potent. Damon Whitaker's recognition, Marcus' operational insight, Travis' moral guidance, Tessa's mentorship, they were all threads woven into an invisible net, ready to be released when the timing was precise. As she stood by the window overlooking the Scioto River, the light glinting off the water, Naomi allowed herself a brief, measured pause. Every denial, every slight, every microaggression inside the bank had been catalogued. Every opportunity had been identified. Every potential ally had been aligned. The city breathed around her, faceless witnesses to the slow, deliberate construction of her victory. This is the moment, the silent pivot, the orchestration of unseen power. Notice how quiet strategy becomes visible consequence. How patience, insight, and preparation become the weapon the world cannot anticipate. Comment if you've ever been underestimated and quietly built your way to recognition. The lobby smelled faintly of printer toner and disinfectant. Naomi's heels clicked against the polished floor as she approached the same desk that had dismissed her days before. Leonard Price didn't look up, he assumed routine, assumed control. She filed her documents silently, noting the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for a pen. He didn't notice, of course. Most never did. Camille lingered near the copier, pretending to adjust paper. Her eyes flicked toward Naomi, subtle, alert. Compliance notes tucked discreetly in her notebook. Every misstep, every overlooked procedure, quietly documented. Naomi caught the glance, nodded slightly. Tiny allies in a giant maze. She requested a clarification on the last loan adjustment, voice calm, measured. Leonard rattled off a policy citation, monotone, rehearsed, as if it could shield him from her presence. But his rhythm faltered when she asked the next question: how often had exceptions been approved in the last quarter? The micro-pauses, the flickers of doubt, she catalogued everything. Patterns emerging. Gaps that could be leveraged. Each visit layered the tension, invisible threads winding tighter around him. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She counted interruptions, noted the clerk who paused mid-scan, the officer who lingered too long in the hallway. Subtle, cumulative. Quiet pressure. Outside, the city thrummed, cars, bicycles, chatter on North High Street. Naomi paused at the Ohio State House steps, the sunlight glinting off marble. Symbolic reflection, institutions, imposing, unyielding, but not impervious. Every rejection, every microaggression, fed strategy. Internal monologue tracked the misalignments, the arrogance, the predictable superiority of men like Leonard. Back at the bank, she ran small tests, queries, policy clarifications, subtle challenges. He reacted, barely perceptible. Each misstep recorded internally, a library of leverage forming quietly. She allowed a delay, a polite wait. Observed his eyes dart to Camille's notebook. He noticed. Panic, barely masked. At the Idea Foundry, Marcus Hensley reviewed operational spreadsheets. They're blind to the systemic risk they're creating, he said quietly. Naomi nodded, calculating. Every minor contract secured, every investor nod, every whispered recognition in hallways, it all compounded. Micro moves adding up to undeniable momentum. Emails pinged. Damon Whitaker had responded. A single line, they misclassified your risk. Let's fix that. Her heartbeat didn't spike, it steadied. The quiet inevitability of leverage now within reach. The pre-contract from a major retailer glowed in her inbox. The room hummed with potential energy. Naomi inhaled, exhaled. Every procedural flaw she had noted, every subtle bias, now a scaffold for action. Leonard didn't know it yet. The walls he thought unshakable were bending, unseen but inevitable. She wouldn't confront him directly, yet. Patience, observation, timing. Quiet dominance. Faceless power in motion. And the audience? Watching silently, waiting, complicit in the tension. Ever been underestimated before you even opened your mouth? Watch closely. Naomi left the bank that afternoon. She walked past the State House again, sunlight catching her hair, shadows stretching across marble. Reflection, yes, but also silent promise. The leverage was hers. She held it carefully, patiently, knowing the system that dismissed her was blind to the storm it had provoked. The sunlight sliced across the Scioto River office like a spotlight, catching the gleam of polished glass and steel. Naomi Sanders entered the room with quiet authority, briefcase in hand, her stride steady despite the weight of what she carried, not just documents, but months of strategy, observation, and patient leverage. The investor syndicate waited, Damon Whitaker at the head of the table, his expression calm, almost analytical. She laid out the projections, every spreadsheet, every operational insight, every contingency plan meticulously documented. Marcus Hensley sat beside her, pointing subtly at a note: warehouse capacity expansion, regional logistics adjustments, community engagement metrics. Travis Garrison adjusted the seating chart for maximum visibility, ensuring allies' eyes caught the critical numbers at the exact moment she highlighted them. Tessa Montgomery leaned slightly forward, nodding in quiet approval, a signal Naomi understood without words. The room hummed with quiet anticipation. Investors murmured among themselves, scribbling notes, leaning toward one another for clarification. None of them needed to speak loudly, the weight of Naomi's preparation carried the room. Damon finally spoke, calm, deliberate. Naomi, your expansion plan is more than viable. It's precise, defensible, and ready to scale. Naomi nodded, her internal monologue cataloging each response. They don't see the patience. They don't see the months of denial, the repeated underestimations, the subtle racial biases that tried to clip me before I could fly. She held their attention without arrogance, her calm a sharp contrast to the bank lobby that had once spat her aside. The first contract signature was placed. Then another. Then the final seal of approval. Papers shuffled, pens clicked, alliances solidified. The energy in the room shifted, Naomi's strategy had become reality. The quiet anticipation was now electric recognition. Every minor victory at the bank, the errors she had catalogued, the procedural gaps she had noted, was now compounded, folded into an unassailable position. Meanwhile, across town, Leonard Price remained in his office, unaware. His email pinged. A follow-up from the very entrepreneur he had dismissed. He clicked open the message, reading the polite, firm notification: Naomi Sanders had secured syndicate funding and a major retail pre-contract. There was no room for argument, no maneuvering. The walls he thought immovable had shifted. His authority, once unquestioned, now trembled quietly in the background. Back in the office, micro-support gestures began to ripple subtly. Camille Horton, observing remotely, leaned back, allowing a silent nod to escape. The junior analysts in Naomi's circle recognized the precision of her maneuvering. Even Damon's partners exchanged barely perceptible glances, acknowledging her calculated foresight. None of these gestures were loud. None needed to be. The weight of quiet competence carried its own resonance. Naomi paused for a moment, scanning the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The Scioto River glimmered, reflecting a city that had underestimated her. This is leverage, she thought. Measured, patient, undeniable leverage. The open loop with the bank, Leonard scrambling, trying to recover, was deliberate. Timing was the ultimate tool. Too early, and they would claw back with empty gestures; too late, and the advantage would dissipate. Orders were placed for expanded warehouse operations. Contractors were called, temporary storage secured. Naomi monitored every movement, every projected outcome, ensuring her team mirrored her foresight. The retail partners' requirements were integrated seamlessly, operations were adjusted without hiccup. It was fluid, strategic, precise. Every step reinforced the inevitability she had quietly cultivated in the bank's lobby weeks before. She reflected briefly on those early microaggressions, the dismissals that had once pricked at her confidence, the condescending smiles of staffers too loyal to question protocol. Now, they were invisible. Their previous authority mattered not. What remained was her planning, her timing, her disciplined patience. Allies' contributions were woven in seamlessly, unseen by Leonard but felt across the room. Every minor support gesture, Marcus pointing out potential logistic bottlenecks, Travis adjusting fleet routing, Tessa validating staffing projections, was a stitch in the fabric of unassailable leverage. Emails arrived throughout the day from Damon's partners, confirming minor adjustments and approvals. Naomi did not rush. She allowed the narrative to unfold at her pace, each micro move deliberate. The investor syndicate watched, now fully aware of the quiet power that had propelled her to this position. They misjudged me. They didn't see the preparation, the calm, the refusal to play by their limitations. Back at Huntington Bank, Leonard shuffled papers nervously. He glanced at procedural checklists he had once wielded as shields. They felt flimsy now, empty. The internal gaps he had ignored, the micro errors he had dismissed, had compounded into an undeniable strategic collapse, his Goliath position quietly eroding while Naomi's Davidian patience crystallized into dominance. Outside, the city moved in its usual rhythm, but within the walls of Scioto River's office, time felt suspended. Naomi's team executed each directive with precision. Minor contracts closed. Supply chains adjusted. Staffing schedules finalized. Every small victory at the micro level reinforced the inevitability of macro success. Naomi leaned back slightly, letting her gaze sweep over the assembled syndicate. Damon's eyes met hers, approving, unspoken acknowledgement of both her intelligence and restraint. Leverage is not loud. Leverage waits. Leverage lands when the moment is perfectly timed. Her internal monologue catalogued the next steps, already anticipating Leonard's inevitable panic, the bank's scrambling attempts, the pattern of delayed realization. A soft chime from her laptop drew attention. The pre-contract from the major retailer glowed on the screen. Naomi allowed a small smile, measured, almost imperceptible. Timing had been everything. The contract represented more than capital, it was proof, recognition, and the final piece in a strategy carefully layered over months of observation, micro moves, and patient calculation. Micro support gestures rippled again, nods from allies, subtle whispers from junior staffers observing remotely, Camille recording discreetly for documentation purposes. Even Damon's investors, seasoned and meticulous, allowed a rare moment of acknowledgement. Naomi held the space with quiet authority, rhythmic, controlled, faceless power in motion. Outside, Huntington Bank tried to follow up. A polite inquiry? A hopeful email. Naomi did not reply immediately. She did not need to. The leverage had been secured. The timing, the preparation, the patience, all converged into a single, strategic assent. Leonard Price, once the embodiment of institutional authority, was now on the wrong side of inevitability. The office hummed with calculated motion. Warehouse expansions approved. Orders processed. Strategic decisions executed without a stumble. Naomi catalogued everything internally, the small victories, the ally validations, the patterns of institutional weakness, and the careful orchestration that had made this moment possible. One step ahead. Always one step ahead. And the audience, observing through the narrative lens, witnessed quiet dominance unfold. Ever seen patience crush arrogance without a single shout? Watch closely. It's happening now. Embedded CTA, guilt-tripping, faceless, natural, a reminder that observation, timing, and preparation had converted humiliation into unassailable leverage. The Scioto River reflected the city skyline as Naomi concluded the syndicate meeting. Pens placed down, contracts signed, strategy executed. She stepped back, allowing the room to absorb the completion of a carefully orchestrated ascent. Leonard's emails remained unanswered, his authority quietly unraveling, while the tangible reality of Naomi's strategic precision stood firm. The glass doors of Huntington Bank reflected the morning sun in harsh, blinding streaks. Naomi Sanders stepped through, each click of her heels precise, deliberate. The lobby hummed with fluorescent glare and the faint static of printers, a familiar background to what had been months of scrutiny, dismissals, and quiet indignities. She carried her briefcase at her side, a simple leather rectangle, but inside it lay far more than contracts. It held strategy, patience honed through countless micro-observations, and leverage harvested from months of careful attention. Every page a silent indictment of the assumptions that had kept her out. Leonard Price sat at his desk, mid-discussion with a client, the same polished, confident smile he had worn months ago now taut, brittle. His eyes flicked to Naomi, registering recognition, and then something unfamiliar, unease. He straightened in his chair, adjusted his tie, a gesture that had once been casual, now a subconscious anchor against rising panic. His smile returned, forced and brittle, but the confidence beneath it had been replaced by a subtle tremor, a human imperfection he could not disguise. Naomi paused, taking in the lobby in measured sweeps. The tellers, the security staff, even the casual clients waiting with papers in hand, all micro-reactions catalogued. A whispered comment, a lifted phone, a narrowed eye. The crowd registered her presence differently this time, not with the usual dismissive curiosity, but with the quiet acknowledgement of someone who had endured, calculated, and now commanded. Her calmness was a weapon, precise and unyielding. She approached the desk with Leonard, the distance shrinking in rhythm with the collective heartbeat of the lobby. Leonard's hands, once steady, now twitched involuntarily. A pen rolled slightly on the polished surface, a subtle tremor in the mechanical world of banking he controlled with authority. Naomi's gaze remained steady, internal monologue cataloging the small tells, the slight pale wash of his face, the tight set of his shoulders, the rigid posture, each a signal of authority slipping, control cracking. She set her briefcase down gently, deliberately. The sound punctuated the quiet hum of the lobby, reverberating through the air like a metronome marking the pace of inevitable reversal. Opening it, she placed the signed syndicate investor contract across the desk. The papers gleamed under the fluorescent glare, stark against the mahogany. Each page was proof, meticulous preparation, strategic timing, patience wielded as a blade against institutional arrogance. Leonard's eyes widened, a flicker of panic. He leaned forward, fingers brushing at the desk, attempting a composure that had already abandoned him. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, words failed him. The authority he had wielded so casually before now seemed absurd in its fragility. Naomi's calm gaze, unshaken and precise, reflected none of the triumph she felt internally. She did not need to raise her voice. Silence amplified every micro-movement, every unspoken reversal of control. Around the lobby, subtle shifts unfolded. A client lowered a phone, a teller froze mid-motion, another exchanged a glance with a colleague. Micro-gestures, barely perceptible, yet unmistakable. Validation was quiet, a ripple in the social fabric of the room, recognition of a Goliath paused, stalled, and quietly humbled. No applause. No fanfare. The victory existed in presence, timing, and the silent recalibration of power. Naomi's internal monologue catalogued each response, each flinch, each tremor. They thought policy could shield them. They thought their authority absolute. They didn't see patience as power. They didn't see timing as leverage. Her hands rested lightly on the briefcase, fingers brushing the leather, steady, unhurried. She exuded control not by volume but by the undeniable clarity of preparation and purpose. Leonard's panic became more visible. His jaw clenched, nostrils flared imperceptibly, hands gripping the desk's edge. The veneer of polished control had split along microfractures. An office worker, a client, a teller could sense it without a single word being uttered. Naomi's calm, deliberate movements, opening, setting, closing the briefcase, were rhythmic, almost meditative, marking the collapse of authority with quiet inevitability. She spoke, voice low, soft, calm. "I appreciate your offer, but this has already been resolved." Each word was a scalpel, precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Leonard's response was a stutter, a shrug, a weak attempt at regaining dominance, but the space had already shifted. Naomi's composure contrasted with his faltering confidence. The lesson was in presence, not spectacle. The crowd responded subtly, a small nod here, a barely perceptible exhale there. Observers leaning forward just slightly, phones lowered, eyes flicking from Naomi to Leonard. Micro-support gestures multiplied quietly, a network of recognition forming in real time. Allies, co-workers, clients, all registering a shift in the hierarchy that had been enforced with condescension and bias. Naomi closed her briefcase with a soft, definitive snap. The sound carried like punctuation across the room, signaling closure without need for drama. Each movement calculated, rhythmic, deliberate. The silent authority she now wielded reverberated beyond the desk, beyond Leonard's frozen frame, into the collective consciousness of the lobby. She turned to leave, measured steps resonating on the polished floor. Leonard remained seated, shoulders slumped imperceptibly, jaw tight, eyes wide, frozen in the aftermath of quiet devastation. He had wielded privilege and authority as armor. Naomi had removed it, patiently, systematically, without spectacle, leaving him exposed to the undeniable truth of competence, preparation, and strategic foresight. The fluorescent glare reflected off the lobby tiles, once a mirror of dismissal, now a testament to quiet authority. Naomi's eyes swept over the crowd one final time, noting the subtle shifts, the fleeting glances, the small gestures that acknowledged the reversal of power. She did not look back, did not speak louder. Her exit was rhythmic, precise, leaving only the memory of calm mastery. Outside, the streets of Columbus moved at their indifferent pace. Naomi inhaled sharply, a small acknowledgement of victory. Not triumphalism. Not anger. Just presence. They underestimated. They misclassified. They failed to anticipate. The city moved around her, unaware of the quiet seismic shift that had just occurred. Inside, Leonard's hands rested limply on the desk, the pen no longer rolling. The papers lay neatly before him, the contract a visible proof of his misjudgment. Authority had faltered, control had slipped, and the lobby, once a stage for condescension, was now a silent witness to a calculated reversal. Naomi's victory was complete. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just inevitable. Timing, preparation, observation, and patience had converged to humble a Goliath in plain sight, leaving authority shaken and the audience engaged in every unspoken turn. Ever been underestimated where it shouldn't have happened? Watch the quiet shift in power, notice every micro-reaction, every frozen face. Pause. Feel the room change. Patience and preparation speak louder than authority. She walked on, fading into the rhythm of the city, leaving the bank, and Leonard, frozen in the echo of her presence. The reversal was complete, the lesson unspoken but clear: underestimate at your own peril. The warehouse smelled of sawdust, shipping tape, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Sanders' motion had grown quietly, methodically, from a cramped office with folding chairs into a space where ambition and diligence breathed alongside the machinery. Naomi Sanders moved between workstations with calm precision, hands brushing over tablet screens, blueprints, and the gentle metallic sheen of new products waiting to be boxed and shipped. Each touch was measured, intentional, an unspoken acknowledgement that control did not need to be loud to be absolute. Around her, The team worked with a rhythm that reflected the influence of her presence. Camille adjusted inventory logs on a tablet, eyes darting up occasionally to catch Naomi's glance, brief, affirming, enough to signal that vigilance and courage did not go unnoticed. Marcus oversaw assembly lines, nodding to employees as if every micro-adjustment mattered, the subtle validation echoing the lessons Naomi had embedded in their strategy. Damon Whitaker leaned against a steel support beam, silent but present, observing the interplay between mentor and team with quiet approval, the faintest of smiles tugging at the corners of his mouth. Naomi paused at the edge of the floor, letting her gaze sweep across the room. The hum of activity was constant, rhythmic, a heartbeat she could feel in her chest. She noted every micro-reaction, a worker hesitating before pressing a button, a clipboard subtly tilted to hide a small misalignment, the briefest shift of shoulders when instructions carried the weight of authority without condescension. She catalogued all of it, quietly assessing patterns, identifying opportunities, seeing leverage points that were invisible to anyone who had underestimated the patience required to build quiet dominance. Her thoughts drifted briefly, unbidden, to Leonard Price. The memory was sharp, the humiliation he had endured, a man used to unquestioned authority, now frozen in a lobby, the weight of his own misjudgment pressing against him. Naomi allowed herself a small inward smile. He had wielded privilege carelessly, assuming position equaled power. He had not considered the value of timing, the patience of preparation, the quiet accumulation of strategic insight. He did not see her because he could not see beyond the narrow prism of bias. The thought was unspoken, unneeded outside her mind. Its resonance, however, lingered invisibly in the air around her. Camille approached, voice low and respectful. "Naomi. Corporate already called. They're trying to reconcile, but it's awkward for them. They didn't expect this." Naomi nodded, absorbing the information without reaction. The bank's attempts to repair reputation would be slow, quiet, and largely symbolic. Micro-failures, subtle erosion of authority, enough to ripple through procedural corridors without a single press release. The lesson she had imparted to the lobby had propagated outward, infiltrating the broader institutional memory without spectacle. Marcus joined her at the work table, laying out spreadsheets and operations metrics. "We're solid. Inventory flows, shipping schedules, contracts locked in. Damon's team confirmed that your projections are now market standard." Naomi's gaze lingered on the numbers, eyes scanning each line with the meticulous care that had defined her approach from the beginning. She thought of every setback, the dismissals, the microaggressions, the slow procedural delays, and realized how each had contributed to this quiet orchestration. Every denial, every eye roll, every whispered doubt had become leverage, each micro-moment transformed into a cumulative power that Leonard Price could never anticipate. Damon leaned forward, voice measured. "You've created something that can't be replicated easily. Not just the business, but the structure, the momentum. People are learning from this model. Quietly, but it's spreading." Naomi allowed herself the faintest acknowledgement, the briefest inward exhale. Legacy is not in flash. It is in persistence. In preparation. In patience that outlasts arrogance. She had built not just a business, but a blueprint, an example of quiet dominance over systems designed to exclude. Camille lingered nearby, eyes bright. "You know, for a lot of us, what you did at the bank, seeing it unfold, knowing you executed without spectacle, it shifted perspectives. Not just theirs. Ours too." Naomi's internal monologue catalogued the subtle shift, validation born from witnessing mastery, not spectacle. Micro-support gestures, acknowledgements, silent approvals, ripples extending from a single point of action, a chain of influence expanding in slow, imperceptible waves. She noted each one, appreciating the quiet gravity of systemic change. Across the warehouse, production continued. Employees moved with purpose, each step measured, each gesture carrying weight without unnecessary commentary. Naomi's presence was invisible and monumental at once, a silent gravity that organized attention and command with precision. Every micro-loop reinforced patterns of excellence, accountability, and subtle assertion of authority. This was not victory in volume, but in persistence. Not in applause, but in recognition that outlasted spectacle. She paused at a workstation, observing a new hire fumbling with labeling. Rather than intervene with overt correction, Naomi allowed the minor error to exist, noting the learning curve, cataloging the potential for procedural adaptation. Marcus leaned close, whispering, "They'll adjust. The system responds to consistent signals." Naomi nodded slightly, eyes tracing the rhythm of operations. Her approach mirrored every microstrategy she had used against Leonard: patience, observation, calibration. Every move calculated, every silence weighted. The legacy extended beyond operational control. Naomi had established mentoring loops that subtly reoriented her team to recognize bias, to anticipate procedural rigidity, and to leverage knowledge over entitlement. Lessons imparted without preaching, guidance delivered through example, authority exercised through deliberate consistency rather than ostentation. Damon observed these interactions, validation clear in his posture, silent but palpable. This was the proof that strategic dominance did not need drama, it required patience and the quiet accumulation of expertise. Outside the warehouse, the community responded in small, tangible ways. Local vendors sought collaboration, neighboring small businesses inquired about joint ventures, and informal networks of entrepreneurs noted the subtle recalibration of influence. Naomi's actions, initially confined to a lobby and a contract, now echoed through the social and professional fabric of Columbus's small business landscape. Micro-loops formed, observation leading to replication, acknowledgement prompting adaptation. Quiet dominance generated a network effect, proof that one carefully executed reversal could ripple beyond the immediate battlefield. Camille received a text mid-afternoon, voice low as she read aloud. Corporate internal review flagged Leonard's behavior. Compliance recognized your patterns. It's rare to see such clarity from someone outside their own hierarchy. Naomi allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Recognition of micro-strategic execution. Validation not from spectacle, but from acknowledgement within the system itself. Silent victories resonate deeper than public applause. Marcus intercepted a logistics call, ensuring continuity across shipments, contracts, and operational deadlines. Naomi observed, noting the precision with which her team now mirrored the disciplined patience she had modeled. Each micro-movement reflected not just competence, but an understanding of leverage, timing, and subtle assertion of authority over entrenched systems. Damon interjected at one point, quietly offering a projection that extended current strategy into broader networks. Naomi listened, cataloging, observing, and integrating without overt engagement, control exercised through selective attention. The warehouse became more than a space of production, it was a theater of microstrategy, subtle influence, and systemic recalibration. Each employee, each gesture, each task completed carried weight beyond its immediate function. Naomi's internal monologue traced these patterns. Authority cannot be coerced into recognition, it must be guided, observed, and allowed to recalibrate through exposure to sustained competence. Her quiet mentorship was simultaneously a lesson in resilience, influence, and the subtle redistribution of power. Even Leonard Price's reputation began to erode beyond the bank lobby. Micro-loops of awareness carried through social media whispers, informal conversations among industry peers, and compliance reviews. Naomi's absence from direct confrontation amplified the effect. She did not need to return. The system recognized leverage and recalibrated quietly, leaving him exposed not to spectacle, but to structural vulnerability. The subtle, almost imperceptible erosion was more potent than any dramatic confrontation. In her private moments, Naomi allowed reflection. The months of strategy, patience, and observation had accumulated into a force that reshaped not just her immediate environment, but the broader landscape of perception, authority, and systemic engagement. Her team, her community, and even the extended network of competitors now acknowledged, consciously or subconsciously, that preparation and insight outlasted entitlement and performative authority. Camille returned from a community engagement meeting, quietly reporting, "They're referencing your strategy as an example in internal training." People noticed the pattern, not the confrontation. Naomi absorbed the statement. No applause, No headlines, just acknowledgement of method, of subtle execution, of patience rewarded. She allowed a silent nod, a private affirmation of the quiet ripple effect she had engineered. Marcus approached with operational updates, his tone measured but carrying subtle pride. All systems are stable. Expansion projections met. Team adapts faster than expected. Damon confirmed your approach aligns with investor expectations. Naomi's gaze lingered on the numbers, then on her team. Every metric, every micro-interaction, every system adaptation reflected more than operational success, it reflected strategic authority quietly asserted, institutional assumptions challenged, and bias countered with preparation, observation, and timing. Damon finally spoke, leaning on the edge of the main workstation. Naomi, this isn't just business growth. This is systemic influence. People are watching. You've created a model others can follow without overt visibility. That's power most executives don't recognize. Naomi acknowledged, inwardly cataloging the validation. Influence is not loud, it is persistent. Authority is not demanded, it is demonstrated. As the afternoon waned, Naomi conducted a final sweep of the floor. The subtle choreography of operations, mentorship, and influence was complete. She noted each gesture, each acknowledgement, each ripple of recognition. This was the culmination of patience, strategic leverage, and the quiet assertion of capability over bias. No dramatic announcements. No confrontation. Just presence, observation, and persistent influence. The ripple extended beyond the warehouse. Local networks of entrepreneurs, small business owners, and community organizers began adjusting assumptions, anticipating procedural rigidity, and considering leverage points that had been invisible before. Naomi's influence had transcended her immediate circle. She had created a quiet recalibration of expectations, behavior, and acknowledgement of competence beyond entrenched bias. Even Leonard's internal memos reflected the unseen pressure. Micro-failures, subtle recognition of operational mastery, and quiet professional recalibration challenged assumptions about authority and entitlement. Naomi's absence from the confrontation amplified the effect. Her restraint and patience now functioned as an invisible corrective force within the institution. Finally, Naomi stood at the center of the warehouse, looking over her team, her micro-observations catalogued, and the subtle social loops noted. The quiet hum of productivity, the slight smiles of acknowledgement, the nods of understanding, each reflected a ripple that began in patience, strategy, and deliberate action. Her legacy, visible not in spectacle but in systemic influence, was complete. Pause. Notice how quiet mastery changes systems around you. Micro-actions, patient observation, leverage without spectacle, ever experienced it? Look closer. Influence is silent, power doesn't need applause. How does patience reshape the room? Naomi exhaled softly, leaving the warehouse as the sun dipped low, reflecting off nearby buildings and river water. Her presence faded into the rhythm of the city, leaving behind a network of influence, acknowledgement, and systemic ripple, silent, enduring, undeniable. As Naomi stepped out of Huntington Bank for the first time, the words still lingered, echoing off the sterile marble walls. Miss Sanders. It's not about your numbers. Banks like ours aren't made for people like you. Her jaw had tightened then, her fists curled silently in her coat pockets. She had felt the weight of every smirk, every quiet whisper, every subtle camera phone lift. The fluorescent glare had pressed down like the judgment of an entire system. And yet, even in that moment, Naomi had begun cataloging every micro misstep, every procedural crack, every dismissive gesture, as if the walls themselves were revealing the blueprint of her eventual leverage. Weeks later, standing in the same lobby, Naomi returned, calm, measured, deliberate. The polished floor reflected her steps, echoing with a rhythm that Leonard Price could not match. His posture faltered the instant her briefcase hit the desk, the signed investor syndicate contract gleaming under the fluorescent glare he had once wielded as authority. A pause. A tilt of the head. A swallow. Leonard froze, caught between disbelief and the slow realization that the narrative had shifted, that the system he thought he controlled was quietly bending around her. Around them, The usual murmur of the lobby became a silent audience. The junior banker, Camille, who had watched every microaggression, held her gaze on Naomi, lips pressed tight, a subtle nod acknowledging the quiet justice being served. Marcus and Tessa lingered just out of sight, their micro-observations validating Naomi's every calculated move. The air was taut with tension, invisible threads of systemic disruption weaving around Leonard without a word being spoken. Naomi did not gloat. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Presence had become her weapon. Each step, each gesture, communicated a fact too clear to deny. She had not only survived the dismissal, she had turned it into leverage. And in that stillness, the lobby bore witness to the reversal. The quiet power of preparation, insight, and timing, invisible to those blinded by bias, was now undeniable. She laid the contract on the polished surface, her fingers brushing the edge, precise, controlled, unshakable. "I appreciate your offer," she said, measured, every word deliberate, "but I've already secured funding." Silence hung, dense and electric. Leonard's eyes widened, the color draining as comprehension struck. The very person he had underestimated, dismissed, and quietly undermined had orchestrated a victory he could not touch. Outside, the city continued, oblivious to the small seismic shifts within the bank walls. But Naomi's impact had already radiated outward. Community partnerships strengthened, small businesses gained mentorship, operations solidified, and the whispers of institutional accountability had begun to ripple through the corridors of compliance. Camille, once a silent observer, now had the courage to speak up, to challenge procedural bias. Marcus's refined operations and Damon Whitaker's recognition of Naomi's vision became additional nodes in the quiet network of systemic change she had built. Naomi paused on the bank steps, the city skyline spread before her, sunlight reflecting off glass towers as if highlighting the path she had carved through skepticism and bias. She inhaled, steady, deliberate. The weight of her journey, the humiliation, the preparation, the patience, had not dulled, it had crystallized into something stronger, quieter, more lethal than anger, undeniable authority. She turned away, letting the lobby, the bank, and Leonard's frozen posture remain behind. Each step forward carried not revenge, but proof that excellence and persistence are forms of justice. That systems built to dismiss can bend, if you know where to apply pressure. That silence, observation, and timing can achieve more than confrontation ever could. Her story, starting with a single dismissive sentence, had become a full-circle lesson. Courage need not roar. Sometimes it calculates, waits, and executes. Bias, once a weapon, had been transformed into a mirror reflecting its own flaws. Naomi had walked into that bank as the underestimated, and she left as the undeniable. Comment below, have you ever been dismissed before anyone even listened? Share this, tag someone who needs to see patience, preparation, and quiet leverage in action. Subscribe, follow the journey, watch justice unfold, silently but unmistakably. In this community, we don't wait for permission. We build. We show up. And we let the work speak. If Naomi's story moved you, follow the journey, justice earned quietly.